Day 2 in beautiful Round Rock, Texas. It is another gorgeous day, a little hotter, and I slept in a bit, didn't get going till about 1. Today I'm going to be playing at the lodge once again, probably going to be looking at something like just 1-3 no limit, but that game is a match stack, so I believe it starts maybe as 1K cap or something like that. But then match stack. So I've heard tell that when Johnny Vibes was there, perhaps he got in for a bullet, perhaps he got in for 2, ran it up to 4 or 5K, and people were just topping up to cover him. So should be interesting today, but I'm gonna run and then get to it.
I started in the 1-3 match the stack game in for $600 at about 7 o'clock. Jumping right into the action here, we pick up a good hand pretty much right away with ace jack of clubs. We raise it up to 15. Texas Poker decides not to disappoint me just because it's my second day here and gives me 3 callers. The flop comes king 10-4 two-tone and it checks to me. I don't really see much point in c-betting here when we're so multi-way. Maybe if there was a club or 2 on the board I would, but this time, no. I check it back and the turn is the queen of hearts, giving us the nuts immediately, but coordinating the board significantly further. I decided to bet $50 here, which I think may be a little bit too small in retrospect, and the button calls. The river is the 3rd diamond, bringing in the front door draw, which I think is potentially better than the backdoor draw coming in, given that no bets went in on the flop. I decided to bet $250, trying to make up for my sizing on the turn, and the button just folds, so I think I had this a bit backwards. In this next hand, there's a straddle on for 10. Middle position raises $35, and I'm in the cutoff with black pocket kings, and I make it 100. Middle position calls, as expected, and the flop comes jack 6-4 rainbow. He checks, and we have a very easy c-bet here. I go for 75. The turn is a 6, and he checks. While this is a card that could connect with him sometimes, he should have plenty of other hands that can call, primarily Jack X. I decided to bet $200, and he makes the call, not believing me just yet. The river is a 4, and he now leads for $320. Very confusing action, and I would just assume in most parts of the country that he's got it here, but seeing as we're in a state that has a 97% chance of succeeding within the next couple of decades, I'm assuming this guy just does what he wants, and this could be a jack, a pocket pair, or something totally random. I stick in the call begrudgingly, and he has ace-4 off. Well, I was right that he does what he wants, but I applied it to the wrong situation. Let's move on to the next hand. We're hurting after that last spot, $700 in the stack, middle position opens to 15, hijack 3 bits to 50, and I make it 175 with ace-king offsuit in the cutoff. The hijack is the only caller, and we go heads up to 9-3 deuce rainbow, hijack checks, and I make a c-bet of 150 here. Hijack folds, man, poker's easy. 1K in the stack now, straddle to $15, middle position makes it 45, I'm in the hijack with pocket 9s, and I make the call. The button calls, and the straddle calls. The flop comes 8-5-3 rainbow, so we're loving life here with a small overpair. It is Texas after all, so when MPC bets $50, I'm not too worried, I call. We go heads up, and the turn is a 7 of diamonds, putting a flush draw on board. He checks, and now I'm feeling incredibly good about my hand. While technically he runs into 2 pair here very occasionally, I think more often than not he's slowing down with ace high, maybe picks up a flush draw and doesn't want to bet it, or just has an 8. I make it 160, and he calls. The river's a 4, he checks, and I just get the sense that he's strong here. I have no real reason to think this, but he could have some 6x in range. It's not the best card, so I check it back and I lose to pocket 4s. The same opponent from that previous hand with the ace-4, so yeah, we're just gonna go with 4s or hot. No footage in this next hand, apologies for that. There's a straddle for $10 though, and I'm in middle position with 7-6 of hearts, and I bump it up to $35. Once again, reminding us that we're in Texas and people do what they want here. 4 players call. Somebody from the next table asks if he's allowed to call, but the dealer luckily enforces the rules and says, no, sir, you cannot do what you want. You're not allowed to call. The flop comes king 9-5 with 2 hearts, and given that I have a flush draw and a gutter to the straight flush, I see about $135. Only the straddler calls, and so we're going heads up. The turn is the king of clubs, which is a pretty bad card. If he does have a king, he's never folding. If he doesn't have a king, he's never folding, so I check it back. The river is a 5 of spades, and at this point, if he were to check, I would feel pretty good about stabbing here. Seems like he would have a lot of missed draws here, but he decides to leave for $200, and I just fold. Well, could be worse. At this point in the night, we're definitely down some money, but there's been some interesting hands getting raised and tabled. King 7 offsuit has been a recurring hand of interest for some reason, so 6-handed and with a straddle of $10, I decided to open in the low jack with King 7 offsuit to 40, when in Texas, right? There's 1 caller on the button, and the flop comes 9-6-3 rainbow. I decide to c-bet $80 because, I mean, what else am I really going to do here? He calls. The turn is a deuce of diamonds. At this point, it feels like I really don't want to get to showdown the real way or have to check fold and not even get to table his hand. So I barrel for $150 and he folds. I of course table my hand because, you know, Texas.
There you go, man. Thank you.
$900 in the stack now. There's a straddle to 6. There's a limp. and I look down at 9 of spades in the hijack. I bump him up to $30. The cutoff calls, the big blind calls, the straddler calls. That guy from the other table nearly convinces the dealer to let him call, but the dealer remains vigilant. We go 4 ways to the flop of queen, queen, 3. Checks to me, and at this point, with so many limpers in the hand, it's pretty likely somebody has something, so I decided to just check it back. The turn is a 10 of diamonds, however, and checks to me once again. Given that I blocked 10-9 suited and 10-8 suited, and I do have a gutter, I feel pretty good about betting this now. I bet $60, and the cutoff calls. The river is the 10 of hearts, and at this point, I expect a lot of his range to be pocket pairs. Sure, he can have some 10x, but given that we block that, and given I would expect to hear from a queen a little bit earlier, I think we can get him to fold. We don't need to bet that big, because I'm kind of repping a 10. And even if I'm not repping a 10, I can have ace high here that just beats every pocket pair in his range. I bet $100, and he folds as expected. Just one more reminder here, guys, that I will be hosting a live poker meetup game, can you believe it, at the Sahara Poker Room in Las Vegas, Nevada, September 28th at 6 p.m. I hope to see tons of you there. I know it's just a few days before the series starts, so it might be kind of awkward if you are coming in anyway. But if you want to come, hang out, play some cards, it should be a blast. Blinds will be 2-3 no limit, and a ridiculous buy-in range of $200 to $1,000. All straddles are live, button straddles are dead. Let's play poker. In this hand, I missed the footage once again, but you'll see a pretty nice photo at the end that at least proves this actually happened, since I know a lot of you guys seem to think, wow, that Vaughan guy, he's just straight up a liar. He makes up hands. Well, at least I have some proof. There's a straddle of $6. I'm an MP with pocket jiggities and... wait, did I really just say that? Pocket jacks, and I open to $20. The hijack and the straddle call, and the flop comes, I shit you not, Jack, Jack, 9. I can't imagine any universe in the entirety of the multiverse where it makes any sense to bet this, so I check. Checks through, and the turn is a 3, or maybe a deuce. I don't really remember. I have quads. It just straight up doesn't matter. Checks to me, and at this point, I don't think anybody's going to build the pot for us, but they might be able to call with something like second pair or 2 overs. I bet 50, and the hijack calls. This is looking pretty good for us. The river's a queen. This is a pretty good river for us to check, I think, because he can sometimes back into a straight, back into top pair with a straight draw, and he's most likely to bet those hands as well as any missed draws that he could somehow have here. I decide to check. He bets 75, and at this point, it's just about sizing. Given that I don't expect him to believe I have a jack all that often, and given everything I said about his range, I decide to go a little bit on the big side, and I make it 400. He doesn't even take all that long and ends up calling, resulting in a pretty big pot here that finally goes our way. It's nice to actually win a big one when we're stuck as much as we are. At this point, I'm into the game for basically 2K. Now sitting on 1.6K stack, there's a straddle to $10, early position makes it 35, the button calls, and I'm in the small blind with black pocket deuces, and I'm just not going anywhere. The flop comes 10-3 deuce super multi-way. Checks to early position, who c-bets $105, folds around to me, and in the past I've made mistakes trying to bloat pots here and get the maximum when in reality it's just really hard to rep bluffs. Granted, it's Texas, but I think that calling here is in order. That's what I do. The straddler calls too, so we get to string him along, and the turn is a 5 of diamonds, second diamond on board. Early position c-bets for $200 when it checks at him, and I call once again, although at this point I feel pretty good that raising could be a nice option as well. Early position doesn't have that much in his stack behind. The straddler just folds though, so we don't get any more out of him. The river's the jack of hearts, and at this point I think we should consider leading because, well, early position is often going to have a 10 or an overpair. If we jam, we always get called by the overpairs, and we might get called by a 10, whereas he may check back a 10. Unfortunately, I didn't go with that decision in the moment. I check, and he just gets the check behind with his $350 and ace 10. Probably missed value here, but can't be too upset. All in all, getting into the game for $2,000 in buy-ins and $60 in tip chips, I managed to cash out for $2,130 at around 1:30 in the morning. Unfortunately, I also owe $10 per hour in seat charges, so by my math, what would have been a $70 win actually amounts to $5. Well, it might have paid for like a sandwich, half a sandwich, something. If you want to see if I can win a few more sandwiches in future episodes, be sure to subscribe, like this video to fuel my publishing fire, and make sure to hit that notification bell so you can see how much I win or lose in the next session. I promise either direction, it's more than $5.